Pradke is a major in the United States Army. He's been deployed 5 times in different and various places that were all hostile in different ways to the United States. And he's a graduate of Knox High School. So, Major Pradke, podium's yours.
You don't mind taking a few steps forward? Come on, fill in the gaps. We're all family here, right? Come on. May 3rd, 1920. Dear Mrs. Williams, General Summerall wishes me to acknowledge receipt of your letter of the 22nd relative to the death of your son, Albert W. Williams. The present commanding officer of Company Charlie, 26th Infantry, states as follows. Corporal Albert Williams was in charge of an automatic rifle squad, and the company was at that time occupying the front line trenches in the 2 sector about 11 o'clock on the night of March 25th, 1918. The enemy threw a box barrage on our front with intentions of raiding our trenches, and as Corporal Williams and his squad were helping to repel the raid, an enemy shell struck in the center of his squad, killing his crew and wounding Corporal Williams in different parts of his body. As soon as the enemy barrage lifted, Corporal Williams was carried to the rear by the soldier from whom this information was obtained, and there he died from wounds the following morning as he was being carried to a field hospital. Your brave son's devotion to duty won the admiration of both his superiors and subordinates alike. In making his great sacrifice, he brought credit to his name and country, success to our arms, and confusion to the enemy. You should be proud. Let that same spirit of courage that prompted you to send him to defend his country sustain you in his loss. We are proud of the noble deeds of your son, and we sincerely hope that you will find much comfort in the knowledge of the affection in which he is held by members of the 1st Division. With sincere sympathy, W.H. Dukes, Lieutenant Colonel. Corporal Williams is a Stark County native. His bravery and valor when in the presence of the enemy epitomizes the character of Stark County men and women, and we ought to stand proud of the men and women as we as a community have sent forward to face the enemies of freedom, liberty, and democracy. It is great to come home and present to you. This place is a great place to grow up, but yet there are many in our small county who would quickly denounce our value and strength. I'd invite you to buy me a beer and debate why it is not. However, be prepared. I will probably be candid, calling you short-sighted, and invite you on my next tour to Afghanistan or Iraq. It takes a village to raise a warrior, and for me, that village is right here in Stark County, Indiana. For the men and women and the graves around us, that village is Stark County, Indiana. We have been blessed with an absolutely beautiful day, haven't we? What an absolute awesome opportunity it is to come before you and present on a day that has become the most important and personal of ever. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Major James Pradke. I am many things, but first and foremost, I am a father and a husband, like all of you. I am proud to declare that Stark County is my home. I am a Hoosier and a proud U.S. soldier who I assure you has represented each and every one of you in a manner you'd be proud of. Your continuous investment in me has yielded 16 plus years of honorable service and representation. I have 5 tours to various parts of the world and have witnessed on a first-hand basis the awesome tragedy of war and oppression. While I have been in extremely intense situations, none, however, compare to the mothers, fathers, wives, husbands, sons, and daughters who, when they tied the yellow ribbon on the front door of their home, bid Godspeed to their soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine, would do so, give a parting hug, kiss, words, and would do so for the very last time. Today, Memorial Day, today is supposed to be bigger than you or me. Without hesitation, I charge that this day, and perhaps many other days of reverence, but specifically this day, Memorial Day, is rapidly becoming commercialized and is at risk of losing its meaning and value. Memorial Day, to the ignorant, is a day of furniture sales, barbecues, camping trips, pool openings, and an excuse to celebrate the coming of summer. Today, we as a nation, regardless of our differences, we as a nation are standing on a foundation that has been built not on wealth, materialism, or political organization. Today, we, the people of Stark County, the people of Indiana, the citizens of this great nation, we stand upon a foundation built on the blood of American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. This, my friends, our eulogizing of those who have selflessly offered themselves to protect and defend the Constitution, this is what the day is intended to be and must remain for as long as our flag flies. Before we reflect further on this point, however, I'd like to take a moment to share some historical facts, and I'd ask you to hang with me as these facts, well, maybe just one of them, do have direct relevance to my presentation. The rest of these facts, well, they evidence the role of Stark County as a major contributor to the strength of our nation. Now, some of you may have heard these as part of a presentation last year, but as I spent 3 days tirelessly reading our history, you're just going to have to be reminded of them again. Before proceeding, however, I would like to offer a personal thank you to those past and present who have dedicated themselves to the preservation of our history and its relevance. History is a reflection of freedom. It allows us to evidence our strengths and learn about the origin of our core values, character, and culture. In this short lesson, we learn what makes this country worth fighting for and calling it home. So, with no further ado, here we go. Before you and I arrived in Stark County, the Hopewell Indians from 200 BC to 400 AD and the Mississippian Indians from 1000 AD to 1400 AD claimed this area as their home. Had you and I existed in 1534, we'd all be speaking French and have really bad attitudes toward the British. From 1534 to 1679, our area was part of a larger area claimed by the French known as New France. According to the historical account diligently provided by Mr. Marvin Allen, it would be another 145 years before a white man visited what was to become Stark County. If you were feeling feisty or political, you could legitimately try a land grab for Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and part of Missouri, or Minnesota, pardon me. On May 7th of 1800, an act of Congress divided the Northwest Territory. The Indiana Territory was established and included present-day Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, part of Michigan, and Minnesota. Mr. William Henry Harrison was named the governor of this new territory. County was carved into what she is today, the 1800s were an interesting time for us. The first circuit court in Stark County was held May 19th of 1851. Some of these graves back here were interment prior to that. Back, I think 1836 is the oldest one I found yesterday. We had huge issues at that time. At that court, there were 4 cases on the docket, but there was only one indictment. It was for hog stealing. Yes, the defendant was acquitted. Of note and significant, and this is important, in 1884, the Grand Army of the Republic, William Landon Post number 290, was organized right here in Knox, with Alexander H. Henderson as its first commander. And I'll tell you a little bit more later as to why that's relevant and important. If I may be so bold, I want to ask what happened to our tradition in boxing. The lightweight boxing championship of the world was held right there in North Judson at Birch's Opera House, February 13th of 1889. Jack McAuliffe of Brooklyn, New York fought Billy Meyer of Streator, Illinois. The fight ended in a draw after 64 rounds, lasting 4 hours and 16 minutes. I don't think I've ever spent that much time in North Judson. Heck, driving through it, it's like, you blink and it's gone. No offense to anybody from North Judson. I love you all. From one of the largest mint-produced capitals in the world to Kama, said to be the world's smallest man, who died at the age of 88 here in Knox. From Lincoln, whose train stopped in St. Pierre, to Truman, who spoke in North Judson. North Judson gets all the good stuff. From the Bass Lake White Sox to our very own Mr. Edward Hasnell, whose voice is heard throughout the land, I am proud to acknowledge that Stark County, rich in history, has never shied away from a fight and has exemplified patriotism, resolve, and strength, seeking out ways to actively participate and answer the call of our nation at war. Poppies still grow in Flanders fields as years move so slowly on. Memories to our senses yield brave thoughts of far are gone. A flash of pride tinged with tear, brave smiles that hide deep pain. Time cannot dim these memories clear. They died, but they live again. Blessings on our manhood rear, may they never be forgotten. Let posterity offer up a prayer for the beach their lives have brought. That's a poem by our very own Sylvia Rice Jonas, another Stark County native. From the French and Indian War to the War on Terror in Afghanistan, the men and women of this great county have and will continue to sacrifice selflessly of themselves to support the strength and resolve of our great nation. Time has proven that in order to protect and defend the Constitution and the way of life we so passionately cherish, the men and women of Stark County are willing to sacrifice and will, at the call of our nation, spill more Hoosier blood, American blood. In the farthest corners of our world, we shall not back down. For we are a nation whose foundation is built on blood, and this we should never forget. Specifically in the territory we now recognize as Indiana, we have witnessed wars that would shape who we are today. In 1684, we had the Beaver Wars. 1747, King George's War. 1752, the French and Indian War. 1779, the American Revolutionary War. In 1790, future Hoosiers were heavily engaged in the Northwest Indian War. 1811, Tecumseh's War. 1812, the War of 1812. And finally, the American Civil War from 1862 to 1863. This would be the last military engagement on Indiana soil. Now this next bit, I've taken from a somewhat unfamiliar site. I think it's called Wikipedia. I don't think it's plagiarizing, as I'm being upfront with you about where it came from. So if there are any English or speech teachers in the audience, feel free to correct me on this, but wait until the conclusion. Remember that fact I mentioned earlier, the one about the Grand Army of the Republic? William Landon Post number 290? Well, ignorant to the organization, I had to look it up. And here's what I found and why they are so important. The Grand Army of the Republic was a fraternal organization composed of veterans of the Union Army, the Union Navy, Marines, and the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service, who served in the American Civil War for Northern and Federal forces. Originally founded in 1866, it was dissolved in 1956 when its last member, Albert Wilson of Duluth, Minnesota, had passed away. Leading men through their experience of the war, the Grand Army of the Republic became among the first advocacy groups in American politics, supporting voting rights for black veterans, promoting patriotic education, and helping to make Memorial Day a national holiday. In his General Order Number 11, dated May 5, 1868, Grand Army of the Republic Commander-in-Chief General John A. Logan declared that May 30th would be Memorial Day, and it was also referred to as Decoration Day for many years. Calling upon the Grand Army membership to make the May 30th observance an annual occurrence, although not the first time, war graves had been decorated. Logan's order effectively established Memorial Day as the day upon which Americans now pay tribute to all their war casualties, missing in action, and deceased veterans. As decades passed, similarly inspired commemorations also spread across the South. Confederate Memorial Day, or Confederate Decoration Day, usually was in April, led by organizations of Southern soldiers in the parallel United Confederate Veterans. Stark County would come to know several chapters of the Grand Army of the Republic. We would also come to know several ladies' auxiliaries that would meet in parallel, supportive of the same initiatives and remembrances. These are the men and women who first recognized that our nation was built on a foundation of blood. They realized that the importance of the American lives played in the growth of our very young nation, and their commitment to the memory of those lives is representative of the growing sense of nationalism and patriotism our nation would be required to call upon in support of our participation in what would become the Great War, World War I. I'm going to take us back for a moment to the Civil War. The 1860 federal census shows there were 2,195 inhabitants living in the young county just prior to the breakout of the war between the North and South. We might assume half of those inhabitants were males, and we could further assume that fewer than half of those were an eligible age to enlist. Most Stark County residents departed for Indianapolis from the New Albany and Louisville Railroad Depot in St. Pierre. Some headed north on the railroad and enlisted in Michigan City or LaPorte. The Copperheads, a loosely organized Indiana group opposed to the emancipation, are reported to have fired upon departing enlistees more than once in St. Pierre. These would be the first shots heard by the Stark County Hoosiers headed to the field of battle. Regrettably, these shots would not be our last. Most would become intimately familiar with the smell of gun smoke and blood as they fought valiantly in some of the most horrendous battles fought on American soil. For 21 of those men, 21 would die in the greatest fight between brothers that this nation would ever endure. Moving a few years forward to the Great War, 3 men, W.W. Osborne, C.T. Johnson, and John Horner, were the Stark County Commissioners who sponsored the historical counts of participation in the Great Wars. Mrs. Hazel Hatch Dibble, Mrs. Emma Thompson, and Mrs. Sylvia Rice Jonas, the author of the earlier poem. These ladies would serve as the editorial board for the Stark County World War history from 1923 to 1924. And I'd like to read an excerpt that I believe is relevant. Henry F. Schicker of the Stark County Democrat, future governor of our great state, editorialized, It is much of a man's patriotic duty to pay his taxes as to help defend his country. Yet how much money do you suppose would be paid to the county treasurer if each year businesses that were tax-paying were put under a volunteer system? I know I sure wouldn't. A few, yes, a very few, but the great majority would be dead willing to let George do it. And so it is with the plan of raising an army by the volunteer system. The nation's maxim, equal rights to all, special rights to none, leaves no room for the volunteer plan. Abraham Lincoln, in urging conscription law, you who do not like to be soldiers do not like this law. And these words doubtless apply today. In spite of Mr. Schricker's concern, the boys of Stark County, upon receipt of the call, presented themselves for examination. In fact, there were bitter disappointments as some were rejected for service. Many left for hospitals for minor operations which might fit them for service and enable them into war. Many whose cases were such as to entirely bar them from shouldering a gun, well, they'd enlist for clerical work, and so they too did their part. In closing, I'd like to read this another poem from Sylvia Rice, Jonas. Mothers of men who gloriously died, poor is the consolation now. The world is mourning by your side, let her gratitude soothe your brow. With the rise of World War II, Stark County would again answer the call of our nation. 19 of our boys were enlisted in the Army and the Army Air Corps, and they would never see the flowing waters of the Yellow River or smell the scent of mid-field fields. We had more in the Navy, and we had more in the Marine Corps. They would never come home to see the formation of the county airport or walk the halls of Knox Post 748, veterans of foreign war, whose first commander would be Frank Devon. And yet many of them are here. Their bodies may be in our cemeteries, but their spirits, they live here amongst us. I can attest to this because of the fact that I have witnessed the fading light in the eyes of a soldier called home to God. There is but one stop we make on our path home to eternity. The guns of the battlefield fade. The world becomes very small. Our focus departs from engaging the enemy and returns home to where we belong. The soldier whose breath is quickly parting thinks always of one last person. They think of their wife, their husband, their sons or their daughters. They think of their high school sweetheart, their love of sport, the waters of Bass Lake, or the rolling fields of Stark County. Some of you have fought these wars, and you know perfectly why you enlisted. In retrospect, the initial reason seemed trite to those who've lost brothers and sisters to their left and to their right. As battle buddies fall, our souls, whether in the trenches of France in World War II or on the USS Juno in the Battle of Kumon-Chin-Chan in the Korean War, our souls are crushed, our spirits are calloused, and we choke back the tears on account of losing our own lives. When in the fog of war returning to one's billets, exhausted from the fight and broken from the loss in spite of victory, the soldier, sailor, airman, marine, they realize that we fight for the cause of our nation, true, but we fight for our brother and sister to our left and our right. We fight to protect one another so that we may go home. Whether alive or fallen, all must go home. The long ago, the sad farewells, the fears and woe, all in a dream return today. The former scenes have passed away. As we close, I'd like to ask each of you to take the time from what remains of this weekend and, in your own way, eulogize men like Mr. George Eskridge, who died in the Revolutionary War, Mr. Solon O. Whitson, who died in the War of 1812, and many other Stark County folks who have died since. I would encourage you to place the banner of valiancy, freedom, and democracy on your table, door, and anywhere appropriate, that it may serve as a reminder that we as Americans hold precious the blood of our children, and we understand. We know all too well, Stark County knows all too well, the cost of freedom. To those mourning for the loss of a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine, to those who commit themselves to the remembrance and importance of this day, to the Americans, Hoosiers, citizens of Stark County touched and scarred by the face of war, while I yet have strength to carry our flag into the face of battle against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I impart these final words with compassion and love of country that the soldier has come to embrace. That the image of thy loving face, whose radiance cheered us on life's way, shall live in memory, fond embrace, as long as reason holds her sway. Thank you to the members of the VFW and the American Legion for your coordination and invitation to this event. Thank you to the town of Knox, my hometown, and the seat of our great county, for serving as our county's most gracious host. Mostly, though, thank you to you, the brave men and women of Stark County, who have known the uniform. Your service, loyalty, dedication to this great nation shall never be forgotten. To those of Stark County whose souls reside in the halls of Valhalla, you are not forgotten. You are remembered, not only on this day, but every day. For your blood is the blood that forms the foundation of this great nation. May God bless each and every one of you. May God bless Stark County. May God bless our great state of Indiana. And may God bless our country, the United States of America.